All right, hello everybody. So we're going to start talking about changes of temperature, changes of elevation, and this has to do with positive, negative numbers, and some of the things that will trip us up in word problems. I wanted to put a section for this, just so that we can be able to have those examples. So find the change in temperature or elevation. Okay. So change in temperature, you have Celsius and Fahrenheit, okay? And so when we're talking about temperature, we are going negative numbers. There's places that are really cold. And then we're also going with positive numbers because there's places that are really warm. Elevation does the same thing. So we're going from places that are below sea level. In previous videos I've talked about how we are able to look at the ocean and we're standing at 0 feet above sea level, and then if we go onto a mountain, we're above sea level, valleys and those things below sea level. So we're still working with number lines. All right, so let's talk about some of these examples that we have up here. So example A, we are going from -5 degrees Celsius to -13 degrees Celsius. So when we started, we had -5, and we're actually going down 13 more degrees. But what is the change that is happening in that temperature? The change in that temperature is what? Well, it's 8 degrees. Now, this is not adding together, this is just asking what the change in the actual temperature is. Now we're going down, so we're going down 13 more degrees. Now we talked about in subtracting real numbers that if you had these two, then a negative here and a negative here, then you would put them together. Well, you have to be really careful with the directions and what the problems are asking you. So we went from having -5 degrees to even colder with -13 degrees, and so it's asking us how much farther down did the temperature go. Okay, it's not asking us to put it together and that type of stuff. So -8 degrees Celsius. All right. So let's look at this one. So -45 degrees Fahrenheit to 62 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. Now pause the video, see if you can figure this out yourself. Hopefully you did. So let's look at the example here. We're going from -45 degrees up to 62 degrees. Now it is, once again, these problems are asking for what is the change in elevation. It is not asking us to add them together, subtract, or whatever else. It's wanting to know how far apart these two numbers are. So if we looked at this, making your number line again, I know that this is negative and that's positive, so 0 is going to be in this number line. I have a -45 degrees, and I wanted to draw this out because there's actually, I have probably a good number of kids that make this mistake when they're on a test or something in a big test like that. So there you go. All right. So you have, because what happens sometimes is we'll look at 45 and we'll look at 62 and we'll say, oh, well, it's probably about 20 something degrees difference, and so that's what happens. But really, you have to understand you go over the 0. So here's a positive 45 degrees right there. So you're actually going farther across, and you're wanting to know the change in that temperature. So hopefully what you got is 107 degrees difference. Okay, so 107 degrees difference from -45 to 62 degrees. All right. So let's talk a little bit about elevation now. So elevation is, like I said, you're going up mountains and down into valleys and trying to change your location on the planet, basically. They're working with feet, and so they went from -300 feet, so they were 300 feet below sea level, And then from what it looks like, they went to a negative 100, so they're actually coming up out of the valley. So they're coming up to a negative 100. So what is the difference between negative 300 and negative 100? Well, they went up 200 feet. Now the reason that I would put the positive here is because they're coming up out of the valley or wherever they're at. And so they're actually getting positive feet. If these two are switched, if it was from negative 100 feet to negative 300 feet, or below sea level, or whatever you want to call it, then I would probably put a negative 200 feet because they were going back down into it. Okay, it just depends on what they're giving you here to begin with, as opposed to this one. All right, so there's a couple more examples. I'm going to erase this really quick. Okay, so they're coming from 1,200 feet, or meters, so we're going to do meters, to negative 80 meters. All right, so they are starting up high, probably 1,200 feet. They're probably pretty decently up there. And they are going down to a negative 80 meters. Now, meters usually is not something that you would see too much, and at least in the US, but you still have to understand that these are just there for measurement. So if I went from 1,200 meters to negative 80 meters, okay, or below sea level, or whatever the case may be, then that means that I went all the way down to 0, and now I'm going to keep going even farther down to 80. So these ones we're actually going to put together. So he went down, or she, or whatever, they went down 1,280 meters. All right, make sure to put your measurement there. So they went down that far. Okay, so that's what's happening. Let's work on the last one here. Got one more for you. So they went from negative 90.7 miles, I'm going to specify that with miles, below sea level, okay, to okay. Now, I feel like the miles was not correct on their measurement, because I don't think you can go 90 miles down into the ground, but you know, whatever. We'll work with it. So once again, they're coming up out of the negative number up into the positive number. So you're going to have to go across 0 again. So we're going to be adding the total distance. So if you look at it, it's 127.1 miles in this case. Once again, that's kind of unrealistic, but that's okay. So they're going from negative all the way up to 0, all the way up into the 37 or the 36 degrees, miles. All right, so hopefully that helped you with elevation and the changes in elevation and trying to figure out the differences there. All right. Have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.